So I says to the guy, looks like you were caught bread-handed.
That's not funny.
No, it's a pun. You know, because like bread-handed, red-handed. Oh, never mind. Oh, hey, sorry, I forgot you were here.
Really?
Speaking of focaccia, let me tell you the best, easiest way to get into sourdough bread making. Start by trying this delicious focaccia bread recipe. I know everybody's been talking about sourdough. It's all hype to you. You haven't thought about trying it, or maybe you've been trying it and not having some success, or maybe you've been doing it a lot and you just want new recipes. Well, this is the perfect recipe for any of those situations. It's easy, you don't need any special equipment, and it is just amazingly delicious. So let's talk about focaccia. It's always more accurate to measure your ingredients by weight using a scale, but I used volume measurements as well with this recipe to make it more accessible to everybody. Before you begin this recipe, you'll need an active sourdough starter. It will have risen 2 to 3 times the original height since you fed it. It'll be nice and bubbly with an amazing tangy aroma. In a large bowl, mix together 1 3/4 cups of warm filtered water. It should be no warmer than body temperature. If you have a thermometer, you can measure to about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, add 2/3 cups of sourdough starter. You can stir out all the bubbles before you measure it. That way, it's a nice consistent volume. Give it a good stir, and while you're stirring, you can add 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil and 1 1/2 teaspoons of fine sea salt. Make sure you do a good job mixing that sourdough starter in before you add 3 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour. Keep stirring until it's well combined. Right here is where you're going to look at it to see if it needs any more water. This is looking a bit tacky, so I'm going to add a bit of water, 1 tablespoon at a time, and stir it in between just to make sure I don't get the dough too wet. At this point, I think it needs a little bit more water, so I'm going to add another tablespoon and give it a good stir. The best way to tell if the dough is the right consistency is to use one hand to stir it up. Grab a little piece, pull it up, and fold it over on itself. If the dough tears easily, it may be too wet. It looks like I may have added just a bit too much water to this one, but don't worry, this is an easy fix. I will add a bit more flour until it's the right consistency. You can go back and forth adding small amounts of flour and water until you get it just right. Once you've stirred it up and it's a good consistency, reach under the dough and with a cupped hand, quickly pull the dough up and slap it back against the bowl multiple times. Rotate the bowl 90 degrees. Do the same thing again until you've rotated around the bowl a couple of times. You're not just stirring it up with this technique, you're also starting to develop the gluten structure. This will not only make the dough stronger, but also more extensible. I'm going to test the dough's consistency again by giving it a little stretch. It feels a lot better, and I think it's ready to go. It does still tear just a little bit, but after a 30-minute rest, it'll be a lot stronger. Now get yourself a damp tea towel or a lint-free cloth to place over your bowl. After the 30-minute rest, you can add some optional seasonings. I never really measure out my seasonings, but I probably used about 2 tablespoons of Italian seasoning, 1 teaspoon of crushed red peppers, a couple teaspoons of onion powder, and a couple teaspoons of garlic powder. Now we're going to do the first of 4 rounds of stretch and folds. Get your hands wet and then grab a chunk of dough and pull it up, stretching it and folding it over onto itself. Rotate the bowl 90 degrees and do it again. Keep doing this until you've gone around the bowl a couple of times. Make sure that as you're stretching, you do not tear the dough. You will notice it become firmer and less elastic as you go. Now cover it with a damp tea towel and wait another 30 minutes. I should mention that if you let your dough rest in a nice warm place, about 75 to 85 degrees, you'll get a much better rise. If your house is anything like mine, it's definitely not 75 to 85 degrees in the wintertime, so what I do is I put my dough inside the oven with just the oven light on. Just make sure nobody comes and turns it on. Now that you've done 4 rounds of stretch and folds, with a half-hour rest in between each, let your dough bulk ferment for another 2 hours covered before carefully dumping it out onto an oiled 9x13 cake pan. You can use a large cookie sheet instead, Your focaccia bread will turn out a little more rustic and oval shaped, but it will still be delicious. Now carefully stretch the dough out in the pan. You don't want to tear the dough, and you don't want to let all the gases out. If you have oiled hands, it makes it a little bit easier. Cover your pan with aluminum foil, plastic wrap, or if you have a lid, use that. Now you have two options for your final proof. You can proof for 2 hours at room temperature, or you can let it proof overnight in the refrigerator. Preheat your oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, and we are ready to start our finishing touches. I like to put a little bit of oil on my hands before I start to dimple the dough. You want to push firmly and all the way through the dough to the bottom of the pan. Do this all over, and you'll start seeing some air bubbles coming up to the top. Now I like to add my toppings. For this one, I put green olives and artichoke hearts. When using artichoke hearts from a can, you want to make sure you drain all of the water. You don't need any extra liquid because this focaccia bread is already wet enough. I like to push down larger toppings like these so that they don't burn. Next, I'm going to drizzle some extra virgin olive oil all over the top. Since I like a little extra spice, I'm putting some more crushed red peppers on top before adding some fresh herbs from my garden. This is a mixture of rosemary, thyme, and oregano. And last but not least, I'm going to put some flaky sea salt all over the top. Now it's ready to go into the oven for 25 to 30 minutes, or until it looks something like this. It's going to be golden brown and nice and crispy on top. The inside is soft and chewy. And oh, look at that. It's just amazing. Even if you've never baked a loaf of bread in your life, you should be able to pull this recipe off with no problem. It's that easy. Share this focaccia bread with your friends and family, and they'll all think that you're a master baker. But enough talk. At this point, my house smells amazing, and I'm ready to dig into this. Get yourself a knife and cut out a nice slice, or you could be like me and just grab a spatula and really struggle with it. I've already started using this spatula, and I'm too proud to admit that it was the wrong tool to grab. So I'm just going to struggle with it for a little bit. There we go, I've got it. Oh, no. Let me try this again. Really get in there. There we go. Yeah, the struggle really makes it more rewarding. Now look at that. It's nice and soft in the middle, crispy on the outside. You can see the steam coming up because I'm not letting this thing cool. And that's the great thing about it. Unlike a normal loaf of bread, you don't have to wait 2 hours for it to cool down before you can dig in. And that's what I'm going to do. If you've enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm going to do more videos in the future, some sourdough videos, some gardening videos, and I'm going to do a video showing you how to grow your own broccoli sprouts in a mason jar in your kitchen. So stay tuned, and remember, you gotta bake it till you make it.